So if you look at a time frame of, say, starting from around 6000 BC, 7000 BC, you have the late Stone Age cultures which existed in what is the modern Afghanistan, Pakistan region. So these Stone Age cultures from around 6000 BC evolves gradually into the use of more complex systems of life, development of more cultures and tools, development of more of craft and other artifacts, and then starting to improve the quality of life. So trading between these different peoples settled in different locations, as well as external. When I say external, there was this other contemporary community of Mesopotamia in what is the modern Iraq region. And then along the way is the Arabian Peninsula, where also there were few communities of that period. Let me right at the outset tell you that this is a very general talk on Indus Civilization, or rather Harappan Civilization, that also I would be using during my talk. So don't get confused. Both are one and the same. Harappan Civilization because Harappa was the first site which was discovered, and then which was later renamed as Indus Valley Civilization because along the Indus Valley was most of the sites. And of late there are even moves in calls actually to rename it as Indus Saraswati also, because on the ancient dried up Saraswati also there are many sites. So whatever, I would be using these terms, Indus Civilization or the Harappan Civilization. Be comfortable with the fact that both are one and the same. So I'll be talking very general about that because I see most of the participants are not professional archaeologists. As I just mentioned, Indus Valley Civilization, which you all have studied at some level or other at the school time or the college time, or the Harappan Civilization, as I just now mentioned, was primarily in Western India, Western and Northwestern India. When I say India, the Indian subcontinent, because we are talking of a time almost 4,500 years back. There was no Pakistan or other countries then. We are talking of the Indian subcontinent. So the north and northwestern parts of these regions is where we are talking of, where you have this civilization which developed. And then this developed into a civilization from the early culture. When you talk of Tamil, from some of the already pre-existing minor cultures in this very same region. So if you look at a time frame of, say, starting from around 6000 BC, 7000 BC, you have the late Stone Age cultures which existed in what is the modern Afghanistan, Pakistan region. So these Stone Age cultures from around 6000 BC evolves gradually into the use of more complex systems of life, development of more cultures and tools, development of more of craft and other artifacts, and then starting to improve the quality of life. So in course of time, when you come from around 6000, 5000 BC to around 4000 BC to 3000 BC, that is around 5000 years back, you have what we call as the pre-Harappan cultures which existed in all these regions. Pre-Harappan also primarily because, as the name shows, they were preceding the Harappans. So these small cultures comes together, and then there was probably for a few hundred years, there was a kind of an interaction between these cultures. They used to come together, especially in the Afghan region and all in the hilly terrain. Winters were very severe. So the communities, the tribes used to come down to the valleys during the winters. So they have a kind of an interaction between the locals and then these seasonal migrants. They used to go back to their homeland after the season is over, when it becomes conducive. But then at some point of time, they decided to stay back. So they settled down together. So many of these smaller cultures which existed in and around what is the modern Afghanistan, Pakistan and Western Indian regions, right up to the Gujarat regions, they had this kind of interaction which happened around 5000 years back. That's I'm talking of 3000 BC, 3100 BC, was when the pre-Harappan cultures existed. These pre-Harappan cultures with these interactions further down a few centuries, that is when you come down to around 2600 BC, is the time when they actually decided to settle down, stay together, and then interact together. And then this gradually gave way to what we presently know as the Indus Valley Civilization or the Harappan Civilization. So this Indus Valley Civilization people is a group of people who came down from different communities, different cultures, decided to stay together. And then when they stay together, naturally there are quite a few necessities. Necessities like there should be an organization which controls their activities. In the sense, different people want different things. So there should be an organization, there should be an agency which controls the quality of things which they need, the quantity of things which they need, the price with which you give and take these things because it was a barter system. There was no currency then. So you have a kind of a government, sort of a government, which probably came up to control all these multiple communities who came in together. And then these governments, these people, when they settle down in the Indus Valley, because the Indus Valley is a very fertile region, and the Saraswati Valley joined together. I'm talking of the entire Western India, Indian subcontinent. So very fertile region, and then part of the Aravalli Hills, which is there on the eastern edge of that, provided them with quite a few raw materials for many other things. So put together, they all came together, started settling together, and then their necessities increased. Good fertile soil gave them surplus production of food. So the communities evolved, improved, their economy improved, their standard of life, quality of life improved. Along with that, their needs and necessities and affordability of things improved. So crafts increased, industries increased, quite a lot of them came in. And along with that is the controlling authority of the government which came in. And then these government, when I say the government, the controlling authority, unfortunately we do not know anything about how this government was organized, whether it was an elected government or a kingship, hereditary kingship, or any other sort of, or a republican government. We do not know. But there was a controlling authority for sure. And then this controlling authority, we don't also know where they actually sat, where their capital was in. But then when you look at the entire Harappan surroundings, the Indus Valley Civilization, you have 5 major cities as of now, as we know, spread around the entire Western India and Pakistan region. One of that is in Haryana, which some of you might have heard about, the site of Rakhigadi in Haryana, which is one of the largest of the sites, largest of the cities of the Harappans. And then move further into the Punjab of Pakistan region, you have Harappa on the Ravi River. And moving further down into the Sindh region of Pakistan, you have Mohenjo-daro. And then further west, you have Ganveriwala. And then you move into Gujarat, you have 5 major cities of the Harappans. And if you look at, it's very strange, if you look at these 5 major cities, they are almost equidistant from each other. So you put a scale between these sites, say around a 500 kilometer radius, you put a circle along these sites, they are all equidistant, roughly around 500 kilometers apart. So they probably would have been the regional capitals which existed, from which the controlling authorities, the government, was sitting over there, a provincial capital sort of thing, and then they controlled their corresponding areas, and then with the local governments under them, like the panchayats or the tehsils or the districts as we call it now under them, probably controlling this entire situation is what we generally find. So with this kind of a background about the Harappans, and then this starts around 26 to 2500 BC. That's what you call as a mature Harappan phase, when these earlier communities came in together, and then settled together, and then this kind of a government developed and organized. 26 to 2500 BC. And then this system of this, what you call as a mature Harappan culture, continues into a time frame of nearly 2000 to 1900 BC. That's a time span of nearly 500 years, round figure if you take. 2000 to 1900 BC, when the civilization started collapsing. We'll come towards the end of this talk about the collapse and all, but then they ultimately collapsed. Collapse, when I say, the high standard of living with which they were living declined. It's not a dying out of the people were wiped out. It's not a system like that. The quality of life came down between 2000 to 1900 BC. That's a span of 500 years, when they had their peak lifestyle. And then during this peak lifestyle, this was supported to a large extent by trade and industries primarily. So necessities came in, the crafts developed into industries, bulk productions, and then these bulk produced items, depending on the demand, was exported to many other regions. When we say exported and trade, both inland trade in the sense in the Harappan territory. So trading between these different peoples settled in different locations, as well as external. When I say external, there was this other contemporary community of Mesopotamia in what is the modern Iraq region. And then along the way is the Arabian Peninsula, where also there were few communities of that period. So trade with them also, which also brought in quite a lot of riches. This is just an introduction of the title basically, and then my mail ID is given there, and even in the last slide also, so anybody who wants to communicate can use that. So this is a general map of the region. The one in red color is what you see as a terrain where the Indus civilization existed. That is in Gujarat, Rajasthan, the Punjab, Haryana region, up to southern Kashmir, and then into the modern Pakistan region. That's a very large territory which was covered by the Indus Valley Civilization. And then other contemporary civilizations, when you go in, on your far left is the greenish colored Mesopotamian terrain, and in between is Arabian Peninsula, and then into Central Asia also. There were quite a few other cultures which existed, of which the major urbanized communities of which one was the Harappan, that's the red color in the Indian peninsula, Indian subcontinent, and then the green colored, the Mesopotamian region on the Euphrates Tigris basin. And they had direct trade between them. And then this trade actually brought them quite a lot of riches, which allowed the communities on both sides to have a very high quality of life, high quality compared to the standards of life of those periods. So that is a rough map of the routes which they took. When I say routes, I'm talking primarily about the marine routes. There would have been land routes also from the Indian coast, that's the Gujarat and the Pakistani coast, towards Mesopotamia, crossing the Arabian Sea, getting into what is the modern Arab regions, starting with the Oman terrain on the edge of that, and then getting into the Gulf Sea where you have the UAE and then Bahrain, and then ultimately ending up into the ancient Mesopotamia, modern Kuwait and Iraq region. So that was the terrain, and then this was utilized by people for their trading and transport. And then if you look at the Arabian history, the Arabs had a seagoing character right from around 6000 BC. Some of you might have heard about the story of Sindbad. Seagoing was a major character of the people of there. So initially shallow seas and then into deep seas from around 6000 BC. So when you come to around 3000 BC, 2500 BC, the Arabs were already experts in seagoing. They made vessels which were suited to travel deep into the sea, and then they also found out what is called as the monsoon winds, the characters of the monsoon winds. When I say monsoon winds, we all know that we have two monsoon seasons in the Indian subcontinent. The southwest monsoon starting from around May, June, lasting till around September, October, and then the northeast monsoon starting from around November, continuing till around January, February, where the monsoon wind direction actually reverses. The southwest monsoon, it comes from the African coast, crossing the Arabian Sea and then striking India towards northeastern regions. And then the northeast monsoon, the wind starts from the northeast, crosses the Himalayas, gets into the Indian mainland, and then goes back into the Arabian and the African region. That's a reversal of the monsoons. So these seagoers actually use these monsoons. They just come out into the open sea from the Gulf Sea into the Arabian Sea, open up their sails, and you just sit in the ship or the boat, which would actually cross on an average around experimental reconstructions. They showed that around 15 to 20 days it would cross the Arabian Sea and then hit the Gujarat coast. That's the wind direction, May to September. And then by November, if you go back into the sea, open your sails, the wind direction would take you straight back into the Arabian coast. This wind character was utilized by the Arabs right from the Harappan times. This was actually discovered by the Europeans when the Portuguese comes to India in the 14th century AD, that's 600 years back. So until then, this was a guarded secret of the Arabs. They used these wind directions, they came to these regions and took the materials back. So one trip every year during the southwest monsoon coming to India, unloading their things, reloading their things, and the northeast monsoon season, November, December, January season, go back to their homelands. And next May, June, they can come back again. So being a trader, being a middleman, this was actually continued for a lot of time. This actually was the backbone of the economic riches of both the terrain of the Mesopotamian and the Indus Valley. So that is just another one of the incoming season when the traders used to come from the Arabian coast to the Indian coast. From not September to May, it should be read as May to September, that's a typing error. May to September when they used to come down here. The returning back. So this from October to March, when the northeast monsoon would take them back into those regions. That's just a glimpse of the route which they might have taken when they used to come and go. We don't have any direct evidence of these trading vessels. No, none of the vessels survive. We have few toy objects which actually shows. This is a model of a reed boat. The boats were actually made with wood or reed, and then which was coated with bitumen to make it waterproof. And bitumen was found in plenty in the Gulf, particularly across the Gulf Sea in the what is the modern Iranian territory, which was used, and then coating of that was done on the boats to make it waterproof, and then they used to go back. We have in the modern Oman region, we have quite a lot of sites where the repairs of the boats were undertaken. When they used to go back after every season, small cracks or water seepages were repaired using further bitumen coating. Quite a lot of such sites were found in those Omani terrain where they used to take it back, repair it. You have bits and fragments of the damaged pieces of the boats lying around with the reed impressions on the bitumen, which was repairing centers. So that's just a model of that. This was found from Mesopotamia, bitumen-coated boat model, which probably would have been used in those times. These are again two representations of boats carvings from different sides. One is that upper one, I suppose, is from Lothal, where we have found this pictorial representation of a loaded boat. You can even see, if you notice, very interesting, is there are live birds also over there in that. So there would have been even sending of live birds, fancy birds, and then other materials, and then the oars on one side. And below also you can see another one, an engraving of a loaded boat, which all of it generally shows the style or the type of boats which probably would have been in use in those times. As I mentioned, we don't have the original boats. Naturally, it's impossible, or you can't expect to find the real boats. They are all perishable, and then those representations can be seen. This is one final one of a toy boat, which was of the Harappan period, a toy boat. Children might have played just like in the modern times when our children, when the younger generation play with toys of cars or trucks or such vehicles. Those days people used to play with the boat models as well as the road transport, which used carts, probably pulled by bullocks or camels, we don't know. But such carts, toy carts, cart frames can be found, which also shows transportation. So these are the carts which we have found from our department excavations, cart frames in fact, and then the wheels, which also we find, which would have been in use for land transport, road transport, whereas the previous ones were all the boats used for river and marine transport. So you have this transportation system which existed using the carts drawn by animals through the roads, through the land, and then these are some of the frames of the carts as well as the wheels of the carts, probably pulled by bulls, and then the boats used for water transport in the earlier period. And then the materials. Coming to materials, you have quite a lot of materials which were in demand in both sides, in the western Mesopotamian region and then in the Harappan terrain. We have quite a lot of material evidences from our regions, from the Indus civilization, which were exported, especially those which are non-perishable. We have some of them surviving. We have these bangles, for example, in this picture, you see the round one, the circular one, which is a shell bangle. And then these shell bangles were in high demand in the West. Along with that, even inlays. Inside the bangle, those three pieces which you find are those thin shell cut inlay pieces. So inlays, just like the mirror inlays or other kind of inlays which you use in the modern times, the shell inlays was used. And on your right is a piece of shell which had this right angled cut and then a hole drilled below, which can be fitted onto a road, and we identify it probably as a compass when you navigate, when you travel, or even for constructions when you have compasses, even for 90-degree angle setting. These compasses could be used. So these are all on shells, some of which were even exported. I have another picture towards the end of this of a shell workshop which our department excavated decade after 15-20 years back in one of the sites in Gujarat. And then regarding materials which are exported, we have evidences of some of them which survives, perishable as well as non-perishable. So here in the first list here on the left hand one, you see evidences for which the non-perishable materials which survives, and then few of the perishable objects which probably we find it only from secondary evidences like cotton, wood, dairy products. The original won't survive. We have secondary evidences like the impressions of them or the vessels in which they were carried. Sometimes survive, whereas the other list generally shows all the non-perishable ones which actually could be found from many contexts, like the stone beads. Stone bead making on precious and semi-precious stones was a major craft in the Harappan times, in the Indus Valley times, and this was in high demand in the Arabian region as well as the Mesopotamian region, which would have been highly costly. So only elite class probably used that. And the importance of that can be seen from the fact that you find, when you look at those terrain, you find that certain burials there. The body was buried, the dead body was buried wearing those ornaments, those stone ornaments. And then presently the body has perished. You only have the skeleton there in the burial. When you open up the burial now, the skeleton shows the presence of the stone beads on the body still, which shows the kind of importance attached to them, which shows how it was valued for some of the elite class there. So this was exported from here. You have a wide variety of the semi-precious stone beads which were exported. Along with that, ivory and shell ornaments. Ivory, naturally, because of the elephant population here, ivory was a major item in demand and exported. And then there were certain exclusive ceramics, certain particular ceramics which were produced only for exports. So that is his. And then metal objects, some of them exported as well as imported. And then dice, game objects. Generally find them. We have found these columns which were created like the modern day chess board, you have these columns and then small gamesman pieces. So probably an early form of the modern day chess or the board games probably existed over there, was exported, and then as we saw in the boat depiction, live animals and birds also would have been exported, and then quite a few toys, and then the perishable objects from their impressions. And then imported back. We don't have many, as much as our exports, we don't have many which were imported, surviving from here, which makes us believe that most of these imports were perishable in nature, like fish or food items, marine products, oils, perfumes, dates, leather, all of which are perishable, so they would not survive. Along with that, some of the materials which probably were imported could have been copper ores. Copper was in demand at that point of time. That's a copper age. You still do not have iron. We are not into the iron age. So copper ores, which would have been, and then flint as a stone was used for making blades, stone blades. And then that would have been imported, and then quite a few varieties of shells, which were shell industry was a major craft over here, as we have already seen. But some of the shells have their natural habitat in the Arabian waters, like some of the larger shells when you want to make large bangles for the upper arm or even for your legs. Those shells would have been imported from there, quite a few of such shells. But then as you see in this list over here, quite a few of these materials are perishable materials. So we don't have many of those imported materials actually surviving. So it would have been perishable.